A terrified woman knocked on my door on Christmas Eve. On a freezing Christmas Eve night, as snow began to fall, a single father preparing for another quiet evening alone heard urgent knocking at his door. When he opened it, he was stunned to find an elegant woman in an evening gown, trembling with fear and begging for shelter. She was being followed, she said. She had nowhere else to go. What happened next would change both their lives forever. If you're watching this story, please hit the like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now, let me tell you what happened that unforgettable night. Liam Carter stood at the kitchen sink of his small apartment, washing the single plate he'd used for dinner. The faucet dripped in a rhythm he'd grown used to over the past 3 years. Steady, predictable, lonely. Outside, the city had dressed itself up for Christmas. Lights blinked from windows across the street, and somewhere a few floors down, he could hear the muffled sounds of laughter and music. A party, probably. People who still had reasons to celebrate. He dried his hands on a dish towel that had seen better days and glanced at the clock. 8:37. His son Mason would be asleep by now at his grandparents' house, probably dreaming about the presents waiting under their tree. Liam had dropped him off that morning with a smile he didn't quite feel, assuring his former in-laws that he'd be fine, that he had plans. He didn't have plans. The apartment was too quiet without Mason's constant chatter, without the sound of toy cars crashing into furniture or the theme song from whatever cartoon had captured his attention that week. Liam picked up the remote, then set it down again. Television felt too much like admitting defeat, like acknowledging that this was really how he'd be spending Christmas Eve, alone in a cramped apartment that still smelled faintly of the burnt toast he'd made that morning. He walked to the window and looked out at the street below. Snow had started to fall an hour ago, light flakes that caught the glow of streetlights and swirled in little eddies when cars passed. It would have been beautiful if he'd been in the mood to appreciate it. Instead, it just made everything look softer than it really was, prettier than it had any right to be. Liam pressed his forehead against the cool glass. 32 years old, and this was what his life had become. Wake up, get Mason ready for preschool, go to work at the logistics company, where he spent 8 hours entering data and pretending to care about shipping manifests, pick up Mason, make dinner, do the bedtime routine, collapse into bed, repeat. Weekends were just longer versions of the same thing, with the added excitement of laundry and grocery shopping. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He thought about Sarah sometimes, though he tried not to. 3 years since the accident, and the sharp edges of grief had worn down into something duller, more manageable. Most days he could function without that crushing weight on his chest. But nights like this, when the silence pressed in from all sides, he couldn't help but remember what it felt like to not be alone, to have someone to talk to about nothing and everything, to feel like he was part of something bigger than just survival. A car alarm went off somewhere in the distance, then cut off abruptly. Liam sighed and turned away from the window. Maybe he'd take a shower, try to wash away the day. Maybe he'd actually go to bed at a reasonable hour instead of staying up until exhaustion finally. The knock on the door made him jump. 3 sharp raps, urgent and insistent. Liam froze. Nobody knocked on his door. Not at this hour, not ever, really. His neighbors kept to themselves, and anyone who wanted to reach him used the buzzer downstairs. His mind immediately went to Mason. Something happened. His in-laws were bringing him back. There was an emergency, but that didn't make sense. They would have called first. The knocking came again, harder this time. "Hello, please, I need help." A woman's voice, muffled through the door, but clear enough to hear the fear in it. Liam's hand went to the deadbolt, then hesitated. Every news story about home invasions and scams flashed through his mind, but that voice didn't sound dangerous. It sounded desperate. He looked through the peephole. The woman on the other side was bent slightly forward, one hand pressed against his doorframe like she needed it to stay upright. Even through the fisheye distortion of the peephole, Liam could see she was dressed expensively, some kind of elegant gown that seemed completely wrong for a December night in this neighborhood. Dark hair fell around her shoulders, and when she looked up directly at the peephole as if she could see him looking back, her face was pale and strained. "Please," she said again, "someone's following me. I need to come inside for a minute, please." Liam's hand moved to his phone in his pocket. He should call the police. This was clearly a situation for the police, but something about the raw panic in her voice made him pause. He knew what desperation sounded like. He heard it in his own voice sometimes, late at night, when Mason asked questions about his mother that Liam didn't know how to answer. Against every instinct that told him this was a terrible idea, Liam unlocked the door. The woman practically fell through the opening, stumbling past him into the small entryway. She spun around, and Liam got his first clear look at her face. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe late 20s, with sharp features that might have been striking under different circumstances. Right now, she just looked terrified. "Lock it," she said, her voice shaking. "Please, lock the door." Liam hesitated for only a second before engaging the deadbolt and the chain. The woman sagged against the wall, her hand pressed to her chest like she was trying to physically hold her heart inside her ribcage. She was breathing hard, visible puffs of condensation forming in the air. She must have been running in the cold. "Are you hurt?" Liam asked, because he had to ask something, and that seemed like the most important question. She shook her head, still catching her breath. Up close, he could see the quality of her dress. Deep navy blue, probably cost more than his rent. Her shoes were designer something or others, the kind Sarah used to point out in magazine ads with a wistful expression. There were goosebumps on her bare arms, and she was shivering. "Okay," Liam said slowly. "Okay, just, take a breath. You're safe. What happened?" The woman looked at him properly for the first time, her eyes scanning his face like she was trying to figure out if she'd made a massive mistake. Liam was suddenly acutely aware of how he must look. Faded t-shirt with a coffee stain from 3 days ago, sweatpants with a hole near the knee, barefoot in his own apartment on Christmas Eve, like the absolute picture of a man who had nowhere better to be. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I know this is insane. I know I shouldn't have just shown up here, but I didn't know where else to go, and I saw your address in the system at work, and I just—" She cut herself off, pressing her fingers to her temples. "I'm not making any sense." "You work with me?" Liam asked, confused. He definitely would have remembered her. "Not with you," she said. "I mean, yes, technically, but not— I'm Adriana Vele." The name meant nothing to Liam for about 3 seconds, then it clicked, and his eyes widened. Adriana Vale, as in the CEO of Vale Industries, as in the woman whose photograph hung in the lobby of the building where he worked, as in the billionaire tech prodigy who'd taken over her father's company at 25 and turned it into one of the fastest-growing corporations in the country, as in his boss's 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 boss. "Oh," Liam said, because what else was there to say? "I know how this looks," Adriana said quickly. "I promise I haven't lost my mind. I was at a gala tonight, and there was this man, and I think he's been following me, and I just needed to get away from everyone who—" She stopped again, shaking her head. "I'm sorry. I should go. This was stupid." She reached for the deadbolt, but Liam caught her hand. Her skin was ice cold. "Wait," he said. "Just wait a second. You're freezing. At least let me get you something warm to drink before you go back out there." Adriana looked at his hand on hers, then back up at his face. For a moment, Liam thought she might bolt anyway. Then her shoulders dropped, some of the tension draining out of them, and she nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you." Liam released her hand and gestured toward the living room. "It's not much, but it's warm. Have a seat. I'll make some coffee." He escaped to the kitchen, grateful for something to do with his hands. This was insane. Adriana Vale was in his apartment. The woman who probably made more in a day than he made in a year was sitting on his second-hand couch that he'd bought off Craigslist. He filled the coffee maker with hands that weren't quite steady, his mind racing through 100 questions he didn't know how to ask. From the living room, he heard Adriana moving around. When he glanced over, she was standing at the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. "Do you see him?" Liam asked. "The guy who was following you?" "I don't know," she said, her voice tight. "There's a car parked across the street. Black sedan. It wasn't there before, I think." Liam grabbed his phone and joined her at the window. Sure enough, there was a dark car idling near the corner, exhaust visible in the cold air. "You want me to call the police?" Adriana's laugh was harsh and humorless. "And tell them what? That I think someone might be following me? I have security. I have people who are probably tearing the city apart looking for me right now. I just needed—" She trailed off, pressing her forehead against the window frame. "I needed to go somewhere nobody would think to look." Somewhere I could just be nobody for a few hours. The coffee maker beeped. Liam went back to the kitchen and poured 2 mugs, adding sugar to both because he didn't have cream, and that seemed better than serving it black. When he returned, Adriana had moved away from the window and was studying the framed photos on the small bookshelf near the TV. "Your son?" she asked, picking up a picture of Mason from last summer, gap-toothed and grinning at the camera. "Yeah, Mason. He's 5. He's beautiful." She set the photo down carefully and accepted the mug Liam offered. "Where is he tonight?" "With his grandparents. They do Christmas Eve with him. I get Christmas Day." Adriana wrapped both hands around the mug, absorbing the warmth. "Divorce?" "Widower." "Oh." Her expression shifted, something softer moving through it. "I'm sorry." 3 years ago, Liam said, because people always seem to need a timeline, some way to measure grief. "Car accident." They stood there in awkward silence for a moment, the heating unit clicking on with a rattle that Liam had been meaning to get fixed for months. Adriana took a sip of her coffee and made a face. "Sorry," Liam said. "I don't have any cream." "No, it's fine. It's good. It's just sweet." "I can make more without sugar if—" "It's perfect," Adriana interrupted. She looked at him over the rim of the mug, and for the first time since she'd arrived, something like a real smile touched her lips. "Really, thank you." Liam sat down in the armchair across from the couch, leaving her space. Adriana followed suit, sinking into the cushions with a sigh that sounded like it came from somewhere deep in her bones. Without the panic, he could see how exhausted she looked. There were shadows under her eyes, and her makeup was smudged slightly at the corners, like she'd been crying or rubbing her face. "So," Liam said carefully, "you want to tell me what happened tonight?" Adriana stared into her coffee for a long moment before answering. "There was a gala. Annual investor thing. Very fancy, very boring. I've been to 100 of them. But tonight, there was this man. I didn't recognize him, which was strange because I know most of the major players in the industry. He kept watching me. Not in the normal way people watch me at these things. Not like he was impressed or trying to network. Like he was waiting for something." She paused, her fingers tightening around the mug. "I tried to ignore it," she continued. "Told myself I was being paranoid, but then he started following me. When I moved to the bar, he moved to the bar. When I went to talk to the senator from Connecticut, he positioned himself nearby. And when I went to the bathroom, I saw him waiting in the hallway outside." "Did he try to talk to you?" Liam asked. "No." That's what made it worse. If he'd approached me, introduced himself, it would have been normal. Uncomfortable maybe, but normal. This was different. This felt— She shook her head. "I told my head of security, and he said he'd look into it, but I could tell he thought I was overreacting. Everyone thinks I'm overreacting. I've had threats before. You don't build a company like mine without making enemies. But they're usually emails, angry letters, social media rants. Not this. Not someone physically stalking me at a public event." Liam thought about the car outside. "So you left?" "I told my driver to take me home, but halfway there, I saw the same car behind us. Same model, same tinted windows. We tried to lose it, took some turns, but it stayed with us. So I told my driver to pull over at a busy intersection, and I just ran. Got out and ran into the crowd. I know it was stupid. I know I should have gone straight to a police station or called my security team, but I just needed to get away from all of it. From the people watching, from the expectations, from being Adriana Vale for 5 fucking minutes. Bull, boss, sakim mates." Her voice cracked on the last words, and she set the mug down on the coffee table with a sharp click. "I ended up on your street by accident," she said. "Saw the building. Remembered your address from the employee directory I reviewed last month. You were the only name I could think of. Someone who wouldn't know me as anything other than the signature on the bottom of company emails. Someone who might just let me be nobody." Liam didn't know what to say to that. The honesty in her voice was startling, raw in a way that made him uncomfortable. This wasn't how bosses talked. This wasn't how billionaires talked. This sounded like someone who'd been holding too much inside for too long and had finally found a pressure release valve. "You're not nobody," he said finally. Adriana laughed, that same harsh sound from before. "No, you're right. I'm Adriana Vale, CEO, Forbes 30 Under 30. Youngest woman to ever run a Fortune 500 company. I'm a brand, a commodity, a carefully managed public image that gets trotted out for investor calls and keynote speeches. She leaned forward, her elbows on her knees. But I can't remember the last time someone asked me how I was doing and actually wanted to know the answer. I can't remember the last time I had a conversation that wasn't about quarterly earnings or market share or strategic partnerships. I can't remember the last time I felt like a person instead of a position. Liam recognized that feeling. Maybe not at her scale, not with billions of dollars and corporate empires involved, but he knew what it was like to be reduced to a single role, to wake up every day and be dad, be provider, be the strong one, without anyone asking what he needed or wanted or felt underneath all of that. How long have you been CEO? He asked. 4 years. Took over when my father had his first stroke. He wanted to retire, hand over the reins, make it look planned and dignified, but everyone knew it was because he couldn't do it anymore. Everyone knew I was too young, too inexperienced. They're still waiting for me to fail. Are you failing? No. She said it flatly, without pride or defensiveness. Just fact. Revenue's up 38% since I took over. We've expanded into 6 new markets. Stock price has nearly tripled. By every measurable metric, I'm succeeding. I'm exceeding expectations. But, Liam prompted. Adriana met his eyes. But I'm 29 years old, and I can't remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to. I can't remember the last time I wasn't on stage, performing for someone. Board members, investors, employees, the media. There's always an audience, always someone judging whether I'm doing enough, being enough, proving enough. She picked up her coffee again, cradling it like it was the only warm thing in the world. My father used to say that leadership is lonely, she continued. I thought he was being dramatic. Now I understand. I have 5,000 employees and I've never felt more alone in my life. The heating unit cycled off, and in the sudden quiet, Liam could hear the muffled sounds of the party from downstairs. Someone was singing, badly, to a Christmas song he didn't recognize. I know that feeling, he said quietly. Adriana looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since she'd sat down. Yeah? Yeah, different circumstances, obviously. But the alone part, I get that. He gestured vaguely around the apartment. Mason's great. He's the best thing in my life. But being a single parent, it's like you're never really off duty. Even when he's not here, I'm still thinking about what he needs, what I have to do tomorrow, whether I'm screwing him up by not being enough. And there's nobody to share that with, nobody to tell me I'm doing okay, or that it's normal to feel like I'm barely holding it together. Are you? Adriana asked. Barely holding it together? Liam considered lying, giving her the same reassurances he gave everyone else. But something about this moment, this strange collision of their worlds, made him want to be honest. Most days, yeah, he admitted. I wake up tired, I go to bed tired, I work a job I don't care about because it has decent insurance and predictable hours. I live in an apartment that's too small because it's all I can afford in a school district that doesn't completely suck. I make mac and cheese for dinner 3 times a week because it's cheap and Mason will actually eat it. And I tell myself it's enough, that I'm doing my best, but I can't shake the feeling that Sarah would have been better at this, that Mason deserves better than just me. The words hung in the air between them. Liam immediately regretted saying them out loud. He didn't talk about this stuff. Not with his in-laws, who were still grieving their daughter. Not with his co-workers, who had their own problems. Not with anyone. But Adriana didn't look shocked or uncomfortable. She just nodded slowly, like he'd confirmed something she already suspected. I think you're probably doing better than you think, she said. How would you know? Because you let a crazy woman into your apartment on Christmas Eve instead of calling the cops or telling her to fuck off. Because you made her coffee and listened to her rant about her privileged problems without making her feel stupid. Because you have pictures of your kid all over this place, and they're candid shots of him being happy, not posed portraits. That tells me you actually see him, not just the idea of what he should be. Liam felt something uncomfortable shift in his chest. You got all that from some photos? I got it from the fact that you're not trying to impress me or network or ask for a favor. You're just being decent. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Before Liam could answer, Adriana's phone buzzed in the small clutch purse she'd apparently been carrying this whole time. She pulled it out and grimaced at the screen. My security team, she said. 17 missed calls. They're probably panicking. You should call them back. I know. But she didn't move to do it. Instead, she set the phone face down on the couch beside her and looked back out the window. The car's still there. Liam joined her, both of them peering through the blinds like characters in a bad thriller movie. The sedan was indeed still parked across the street, engine running. As they watched, the driver's side door opened and a figure stepped out. Adriana tensed beside him. That's him! That's the man from the gala! The figure was too far away for Liam to make out details, but he could see it was a man in a dark coat, looking up at the building. Looking, Liam realized, with a cold spike of alarm directly at his window. Get away from the glass, he said, pulling Adriana back. He knows I'm here, she said, her voice tight with fear. How does he know? Maybe he's just checking the whole building. Maybe it's a coincidence. But even as he said it, Liam didn't believe it. The man stood there for another moment, then pulled out a phone and made a call. He spoke briefly into it, then got back in the car. Should we call the police now? Liam asked. Adriana was already dialing. She put the phone to her ear, and Liam could hear it ringing on the other end. It was answered on the first ring. Marcus? Yes, it's me. I'm fine. I'm safe. I need you to listen carefully. Liam moved away to give her privacy, going back to the kitchen to rinse out the coffee pot. He didn't know what else to do. His hands needed something to occupy them before the adrenaline made them shake. A billionaire was in his living room, hiding from what might be an actual stalker on Christmas Eve. This was not how he'd imagined his night going. From the living room, he could hear Adriana talking in low, urgent tones. I don't care what it looks like. No, don't come here yet. You'll lead them right to... Marcus, please, just trust me on this, because I'm asking you to. She appeared in the kitchen doorway a moment later, phone still in hand. They're running the plates on the car, she said, and checking the security footage from the gala to get a better look at the guy. Marcus wants to send a team here, but I told him to wait. Why? Because if they show up with a full security detail, it'll draw attention. And if this guy is watching the building, he'll know exactly where I am. She rubbed her temples again. I know I'm being paranoid. I know this probably seems crazy to you. You're not crazy, Liam said. Someone's following you. That's not paranoia. That's reality. But maybe it's just a journalist or an overeager investor. Maybe I'm blowing this completely out of proportion because I'm stressed and tired and I haven't taken a real day off in 6 months. Or maybe your instincts are right and there's actually something wrong. Liam dried his hands on the dish towel. Look, I don't know anything about your world or the threats you deal with, but I know what it's like when something feels off. When you can't shake the feeling that something's not right. That's not crazy. That's your brain trying to keep you safe. Adriana looked at him for a long moment, and Liam had the distinct impression he was being evaluated. Not in a condescending way, but like she was trying to figure out if he meant what he said or if he was just being polite. Thank you, she said finally, for not making me feel like I'm losing my mind. You're welcome to stay here until your security team sorts this out, Liam offered. It's not much, but it's warm and anonymous. Nobody's going to think to look for you in a data entry clerk's apartment. A smile ghosted across her face. Logistics coordinator. What? Your title. You're a logistics coordinator, not a data entry clerk. You know my title? I know everyone's title. It's part of the job. Caring about the people who make the company run. She paused. Even if I'm not always great at showing it. The heating unit kicked on again, and Adriana shivered despite the warmth starting to fill the room. Liam realized she was still in that dress, still completely unprepared for a winter night. You must be freezing, he said. Let me get you something warmer to wear. He disappeared into the bedroom before she could protest, digging through his dresser for something that might work. He settled on a sweatshirt from his college days, worn soft but clean, and a pair of sweatpants that would be too big for her but better than nothing. When he returned to the living room, Adriana was back at the window. The car's still there, she said. Here. Liam handed her the clothes. Bathroom's down the hall, first door on the right. There's a lock on the door. Adriana took the clothes with a small, grateful nod and disappeared. Liam used the time to check his own phone. Nothing from his in-laws, which meant Mason was fine. A few texts from coworkers in the group chat they'd started last month, mostly memes and complaints about holiday retail traffic. Nothing urgent. He went back to the window and looked at the sedan. It was still there, exhaust puffing into the cold air. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was exactly what Adriana feared. Either way, Liam felt a strange sense of responsibility settling over his shoulders. She'd come to him for help. She trusted him, for whatever reason, to keep her safe. The bathroom door opened, and Adriana emerged wearing his old college sweatshirt and sweatpants that she'd had to roll at the waist several times. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and she'd washed off most of her makeup. She looked younger like this, less like a CEO, and more like someone who could have been a regular person, living a regular life. "Better?" Liam asked. "Much." She folded her dress carefully and set it on the arm of the couch. "I feel like I can breathe again." They settled back into their previous positions, Adriana on the couch and Liam in the armchair. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, coating the parked cars and sidewalks in white. The party downstairs had gotten quieter, maybe winding down, maybe just settling into a different phase of the evening. "Can I ask you something?" Adriana said after a while. "Sure. Why did you let me in? You didn't know it was me when you opened the door. For all you knew, I could have been anyone. Could have been dangerous." Liam thought about it. "I don't know. You sounded scared. And I guess I figured if someone was desperate enough to knock on a stranger's door on Christmas Eve, they probably really needed help." "That's a nice way of thinking. Naive, maybe, but nice. Sarah used to say I was too trusting, that I saw the best in people even when they didn't deserve it." "Your wife?" Liam nodded. "She was more skeptical, questioned people's motives, didn't take things at face value. Drove me crazy sometimes, but she was usually right." "What was she like?" Adriana asked. "If you don't mind talking about her." Liam didn't mind. He usually avoided conversations about Sarah because they made other people uncomfortable, but Adriana was asking like she actually wanted to know. "She was smart," he said. "Scary smart. She worked in marketing, and she could read people like books. Knew exactly what they wanted, what they feared, what would make them take action. She could have been running her own agency probably, but she liked working for other people. Less pressure, more freedom." He smiled at the memory. "She was funny too, had this dry sense of humor that caught you off guard. And she was passionate about things, environmental causes, local politics, making sure Mason grew up understanding that the world didn't revolve around him. She would have fought you on your company's carbon footprint." Adriana laughed softly. "I would have listened. She was a good mom," Liam continued, his voice getting quieter. "Natural at it in a way I've never been. She knew how to make everything fun, how to turn mundane stuff into adventures. Grocery shopping became treasure hunting. Cleaning his room became a race against an imaginary clock. I just do things. I'm not creative like that." "Mason seems happy in his photos." "I hope so. I'm trying. But there are days when I wonder if trying is enough." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of shared loneliness settling between them. Liam realized this was the most honest conversation he'd had in months. Maybe years. Something about Adriana's directness, her willingness to be vulnerable, made it easier to do the same. "What about you?" he asked. "Parents? Siblings? Someone waiting for you somewhere?" "My father's in a care facility," Adriana said. "Second stroke last year left him unable to speak clearly. I visit when I can, but it's hard. He looks at me like he's trying to say something important, and I can never figure out what it is. My mother died when I was 16. Cancer." "I'm sorry. No siblings. I was an only child, which my father always said made me competitive because I had nobody to practice sharing with." She picked at a loose thread on the sweatshirt. "I have friends, I guess. People I went to school with, colleagues in the industry. But it's not the same. There's always this distance, this awareness that I'm Adriana Vale and they're not. Even my closest friends seem to weigh their words around me now, like they're afraid of saying the wrong thing to the boss. That must be isolating." "It is. Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if I'd said no when my father asked me to take over. If I'd pursued something else, something smaller, something where I could just be good at my job without being a symbol or a target or a disappointment waiting to happen." "You think you're a disappointment?" "I think I'm never enough. The board wants more growth. The shareholders want higher returns. The employees want better benefits and work-life balance. The media wants me to be a role model or a cautionary tale, depending on the news cycle. Everyone wants something from me, and I can't give them all what they want. So I end up giving pieces of myself to everyone and having nothing left over. Liam understood that feeling too. The constant depletion, the sense of being divided into smaller and smaller fragments until there was barely anything recognizable left. You ever think about just walking away? He asked. Every day. But then I think about the thousands of people who depend on this company for their livelihoods. I think about my father, who spent his whole life building something he believed in. I think about all the people who said I couldn't do this, who are waiting for me to prove them right. And I can't. I can't just walk away. Even if it's making you miserable? Adriana looked at him sharply. I didn't say I was miserable. You didn't have to. They held each other's gaze for a moment, and Liam saw something flicker across her face. Recognition, maybe, or resignation. The acknowledgement of a truth she didn't want to admit out loud. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, then back at Liam. Marcus says the car is registered to a private investigation firm. Could be working for a competitor, trying to dig up dirt. Could be a journalist. Could be something else entirely. She set the phone down. He wants to bring me in, take me somewhere secure. What do you want to do? It was such a simple question, but Adriana looked at him like he'd asked something profound. I don't know, she said honestly. I should go. I should let my team handle this and get back to my life. But the thought of getting back in a car, going back to my apartment where everything is exactly as I left it, perfect and empty and waiting for me to start the cycle all over again tomorrow, she broke off, shaking her head. I don't want to go back yet. Then don't. It's not that simple. Why not? You're safe here. The guy in the car knows your security is onto him. He's not going to try anything. And if he does, we call the police. Liam shrugged. Stay. Have another cup of coffee. Tell your team you're fine and you'll check in later. Take a few more hours to just be nobody. Adriana studied him carefully. Why are you being so nice to me? Because you asked for help and I can give it. It's not complicated. In my experience, everything's complicated. People always want something. I don't want anything from you, Liam said. And it was true. He didn't need her money, didn't care about her connections, had no ulterior motive beyond basic human decency. I'm just a guy who's alone on Christmas Eve, and you're a person who needed somewhere safe to be for a while. That's it. Adriana looked like she wanted to argue, to find the angle he was working. But after a moment, her shoulders relaxed again, and she nodded. Okay, she said. Okay. I'll stay a little longer. She called Marcus back and had a brief, tense conversation that ended with her promising to check in every hour. When she hung up, she looked exhausted, but also relieved, like she'd just won a small battle. So what do people do on Christmas Eve? She asked. Normal people, I mean, not people at galas or corporate parties. Liam laughed. I don't know if I'm the right person to ask. My plans tonight were pretty much eating leftover Chinese food and watching whatever's on TV. Sounds perfect. Really? Really? I can't remember the last time I just watched TV. Something mindless. Something that doesn't require me to be on, or impressive, or strategic. Liam picked up the remote and started scrolling through channels. He landed on a classic Christmas movie, one of those black and white films from the 40s that played on repeat every December. This work? Adriana settled deeper into the couch. Yeah, this works. They watched in comfortable silence for a while. Liam found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't expected. The strangeness of the situation had worn off, replaced by something almost normal. Just two people watching a movie, not thinking about tomorrow or yesterday or anything beyond this moment. I lied earlier, Adriana said during a commercial break. About what? When I said I picked your address randomly from the employee directory. I didn't. I remembered you specifically. Liam looked at her in surprise. Why? You sent an email about 3 months ago. Someone on your team had made a mistake with a major shipment, and it was going to cost the company a lot of money. Your supervisor was ready to fire them, but you sent this email up the chain explaining what had happened, how it was a system error, not a personal failure, and suggesting changes to prevent it from happening again. You took responsibility even though it wasn't your fault. You protected someone who couldn't protect themselves. Liam barely remembered that email. It had seemed like the obvious thing to do at the time. That email got flagged to me because it involved a major account, Adriana continued. I read it, and I remember thinking that whoever wrote it actually cared about people. Not just productivity or profit margins, but actual human beings. I made a note of your name. And tonight, when I needed somewhere to go, somewhere I might find someone who would just see me as a person and not a commodity, I thought of you." Liam didn't know what to say. The idea that some random email he'd sent months ago had made enough of an impression for her to remember his name, to trust him with this moment, it was overwhelming. "I'm glad you did," he said finally. "Come here, I mean." "Me too." The movie came back on, but neither of them was really watching anymore. Liam could feel the shift in the room, the way the air had changed. They weren't strangers sharing space anymore. They were two people who'd somehow found each other in the middle of their respective isolation and recognized something familiar. "Can I tell you something?" Adriana asked. "Sure. I'm scared all the time. Not of stalkers or competitors or anything concrete like that. I'm scared that I'm going to wake up one day and realize I've spent my whole life chasing something that doesn't actually matter. That I'll have all the success and money and recognition in the world, and I'll still be alone. Still be empty." Liam thought about his own fears, that he was failing Mason, that he'd never be more than barely adequate, that this small, predictable life was all he'd ever have. "I think everyone's scared of something like that," he said. "We just don't talk about it because we're afraid of seeming weak or ungrateful or like we don't have our shit together." "Do you have your shit together?" "Not even close." Adriana laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh Liam had heard from her all night. It transformed her face, made her look younger and lighter and more real. "I like you, Liam Carter," she said. "You're honest. That's rare." "I like you too," Liam replied. And he meant it. Not Adriana Vale, the CEO, but the woman sitting on his couch in borrowed sweatpants, watching an old movie and admitting her fears. The person she was when nobody was watching. They turned back to the movie, but Liam was acutely aware of her presence now, the way she tucked her feet under her on the couch, the way she absently twisted a strand of hair around her finger, the way she seemed to be genuinely relaxing for the first time since she'd arrived. Outside, the snow continued to fall. The car was still there. Liam had checked during the last commercial break, but it felt less threatening now, less immediate. Whatever was happening out there in the real world could wait a little longer. In here, in this small apartment that suddenly felt less empty than it had in years, Liam let himself exist in the moment. No past grief weighing him down, no future worries pulling him forward. Just this strange, unexpected Christmas Eve with a woman who'd knocked on his door and reminded him what it felt like to connect with another human being. The movie credits rolled. Adriana glanced at her phone. "I should probably go soon," she said, but she didn't move. "Probably," Liam agreed. Neither of them stood up. The next movie started, another classic. They kept watching. And for a little while longer, the world outside could wait. The second movie dissolved into a third, and Liam realized with a start that it was past midnight. Christmas Day, technically, though it didn't feel like it. The apartment was warm now, maybe too warm, but neither of them had moved to adjust the thermostat. Adriana had shifted positions on the couch, her legs stretched out now, her head resting against the armrest. Her eyes were half closed, and Liam wondered if she was actually watching or just pretending to stay awake. "You can sleep if you want," he said. "I don't mind." She opened her eyes fully and looked at him. "I'm not tired." "You look tired." "That's different." She sat up straighter, as if to prove a point. "I'm tired all the time. That doesn't mean I can actually sleep." "Insomnia?" "Something like that. My brain doesn't know how to shut off." She rubbed her eyes with the heels of her hands. "I'll lie in bed for hours, running through problems, planning conversations, replaying mistakes I made 3 years ago. It's exhausting, but I can't stop doing it." Liam understood that too. The nights after Sarah died, he'd lie awake reconstructing the accident in his mind, trying to find the moment where things could have gone differently. If she'd left work 5 minutes later, if she'd taken a different route, if he'd called her and kept her on the phone long enough that she wouldn't have been at that intersection at that exact second when the drunk driver ran the red light. "Have you tried therapy?" he asked. Adriana laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I have a therapist on retainer, corporate stress management. She tells me to practice mindfulness and set better boundaries. Very helpful advice for someone whose job is being available 24/7 and making decisions that affect thousands of people. So it doesn't help. It helps her bank account." Adriana pulled the sweatshirt sleeves down over her hands. "I know I sound ungrateful. I know how privileged I am to even have access to therapy. But sometimes it feels like she's treating symptoms without addressing the actual disease, Like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. What's the bullet wound? She considered the question for a long moment. Loneliness, I think. The kind that comes from being surrounded by people who all want something from you but don't actually know you. Who see the version of you that you perform for them, not the version that exists when you're alone at 3 a.m, wondering if any of it matters. Liam got up and went to the kitchen. He needed to move, needed to do something with the restless energy her words had stirred up. He opened the refrigerator and stared at the contents without really seeing them. "You hungry?" he called out. "I don't know, maybe." He pulled out the leftover Chinese food he'd mentioned earlier, containers of fried rice and orange chicken that were probably still good. Probably. He divided them between 2 plates and stuck them in the microwave. "This is probably the worst Christmas dinner you've ever had," he said as the microwave hummed. Adriana appeared in the kitchen doorway. "I skipped dinner at the gala, too busy being paranoid and watching The Room. So honestly, this might be the best meal I've had all day." The microwave beeped. Liam handed her a plate and a fork, and they stood at the counter eating cold-turned lukewarm Chinese food at 12:30 in the morning on Christmas Day. It should have been depressing. Instead, it felt oddly comfortable, like something friends would do. Not that they were friends exactly, they barely knew each other. But there was an ease between them now that Liam hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. "Can I ask you something personal?" Adriana said between bites. "Sure." "Do you date?" The question caught him off guard. "Not really. I mean, I tried a few times. My in-laws kept pushing me to get back out there, said it wasn't healthy for me or Mason to be alone. But it always felt wrong, like I was trying to replace Sarah, which isn't fair to anyone." "How long is long enough?" Adriana asked. "Before it stops feeling like replacement and starts feeling like just living? I don't know. 3 years obviously isn't enough." He pushed rice around his plate. "What about you? You date?" "Occasionally. Usually people in the industry who understand the demands of the job, but it never goes anywhere. They're either intimidated by me or trying to use me for connections. And the ones who aren't doing either of those things can't handle that I'm never available, never fully present, always thinking about work." Sounds lonely. It is, but it's easier than pretending to be someone I'm not. Easier than trying to make myself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. She set her plate down on the counter. "My last relationship ended because I missed his birthday dinner for an emergency board meeting. He said I cared more about the company than I did about him. He was probably right." "Did you love him?" Adriana tilted her head, thinking. "I don't know. I wanted to, I tried to, but I don't think I know how to love someone when I'm like this. When I'm stretched so thin, there's nothing substantial left to give." Liam rinsed his plate in the sink, watching the water wash away the remnants of sauce. "I think that's the saddest thing I've heard all night." "Sadder than a widowed single father eating Chinese food alone on Christmas?" "Yeah, because at least I know what love feels like. I had it, I lost it, but I had it. You sound like you've never let yourself have it at all." The words hung between them, heavy and true. Adriana looked away first, her jaw tight. "That's not fair," she said quietly. "Maybe not. But is it wrong?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked back to the living room and went to the window again, a habit she'd developed over the past few hours. Liam followed, watching as she peered through the blinds. "Car's gone," she said. Liam looked. She was right. The sedan had disappeared at some point while they'd been eating. The street was empty except for snow-covered parked cars and the occasional passing vehicle. "That's good, right?" he said. "I guess." But she didn't sound relieved. She sounded almost disappointed, like the absence of the threat meant the absence of a reason to stay. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it, her expression darkening. Marcus again. He's saying they tracked down the PI firm. It was hired by a competitor looking into our acquisition strategy. Nothing dangerous, just corporate espionage. He wants to know if I'm ready to come home now. "Are you?" Adriana stared at the phone for a long moment, then typed something and set it down without showing him. "I told him I'd call him in the morning." "It is morning." "Later morning. Reasonable hour morning." She turned away from the window and looked at Liam directly. "Can I stay? Just a little longer?" There was something raw in the question, something that went beyond the simple logistics of shelter. She wasn't asking if she could hide here. She was asking if she could exist here, in this space, as herself, for a few more hours before she had to put the armor back on. "Yeah," Liam said. "You can stay." Relief washed over her face, so profound that it made Liam's chest ache. When was the last time someone had said yes to her without conditions, without expecting something in return? They settled back into their positions, but the movie had lost its appeal. Instead, they just sat in the quiet, listening to the occasional sound of a car passing outside and the heating unit cycling on and off. "Tell me about Mason," Adriana said. "What's he like?" Liam smiled despite himself. "He's a lot. Talks constantly. Asks about 1,000,000 questions a day. Why is the sky blue? Where do birds go in winter? What happens when you die? That kind of stuff." "What do you tell him? About death?" "The truth, mostly. Or as much truth as a 5-year-old can handle. I told him his mom's body stopped working, that she's not in pain, that she's not coming back. I didn't give him fairy tales about heaven or seeing her again someday because I don't believe that, and I won't lie to him." "That must have been hard. Harder than anything I've ever done." Liam's voice caught slightly. He cried for days, kept asking why she left him, if it was his fault. I had to explain over and over that it wasn't his fault, that sometimes bad things just happen, that she loved him more than anything. I don't think he believed me at first. I'm not sure he believes me now. "He will," Adriana said. "When he's older, he'll understand that you were honest with him, that you didn't try to protect him from reality, you tried to help him live in it. I hope you're right." "What does he like to do? What makes him happy?" Liam thought about it. He loves dinosaurs, has about 50 toy dinosaurs that he's named and created elaborate backstories for. He likes building things with blocks, then destroying them and starting over. He likes it when I do silly voices for his bedtime stories. And he loves snow. Every time it snows, he acts like it's the first time he's ever seen it. He sounds wonderful. He is. He's the only thing I've ever done that matters. Liam leaned back in the chair. "What about you? You ever think about having kids?" "Sometimes, but I can't imagine how I'd make it work. I'm barely managing my own life. Adding another person who depends on me completely?" She shook her head. "It seems impossible." "It is impossible. And then you do it anyway because you don't have a choice." "That's terrifying." "Yeah, but it's also the best thing I've ever experienced. Even with all the hard parts, even with the exhaustion and the fear and the feeling like I'm failing every day, I wouldn't trade it for anything." Adriana drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "I envy that. Having something you know matters, something that gives you purpose beyond just existing. You run a company, you employ thousands of people. That matters." "Does it? Or am I just moving money around, making rich people richer, contributing to a system that's fundamentally broken?" She rested her chin on her knees. "I used to think the work mattered. When I first took over, I had all these ideas about how we could do things differently. Better employee benefits, environmental sustainability, ethical supply chains. But the board shot down most of it. Too expensive, too risky, not our responsibility. And I didn't fight hard enough because I was too busy trying to prove I could do the job at all. You could fight now. You're established now. Am I? Or am I just one bad quarter away from being replaced?" She laughed bitterly. "The thing about being a young female CEO is that you're always on trial. One mistake, one sign of weakness, and they'll use it as proof that you never should have been in charge to begin with." Liam wanted to argue, to tell her she was being paranoid, but he suspected she was right. He'd seen enough workplace politics to know that some people had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. "So what do you do?" he asked. "Just accept it?" "I don't know. That's the problem. I don't know if I'm supposed to keep pushing, keep fighting, or if I'm supposed to accept that some battles can't be won and focus on the things I can change." She pressed her palms against her eyes. "I'm so tired of making decisions. I make hundreds of them every day, and they all feel equally important and equally meaningless." "What would you do if you quit?" "I can't quit." "I didn't ask if you could. I asked what you'd do if you did." Adriana was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost wistful. "I'd travel, I think. Not business trips to conference hotels, but actual travel. I'd go to small towns nobody's heard of and eat at restaurants that don't have Michelin stars. I'd learn to paint or garden or Do something with my hands that produces something real. I'd sleep past 6 in the morning. I'd read books just because I wanted to, not because they're on some leadership development reading list. Sounds nice. Sounds impossible. Why? Because I have responsibilities. Because thousands of people depend on the company for their livelihoods. Because my father built something, and I can't just walk away from it. Even if it's killing you, Adriana looked at him sharply. I'm not dying. Aren't you? Maybe not physically, but the person you could have been, the life you could have had. Isn't that dying a little bit every day you stay in a role that makes you miserable? You don't understand. You're right, I don't. I don't understand your world or the pressures you deal with, but I understand what it's like to wake up every day and do things you don't want to do because you think you have to. And I understand that at some point, you have to decide if surviving is the same thing as living. And what's your decision? Are you living or just surviving? It was a fair question, and Liam didn't have a good answer. I'm doing the best I can with what I have. Some days that feels like living. Most days it feels like surviving. At least you're honest about it. What good is honesty if nothing changes? They fell into silence again, but it felt different now. Heavier. Like they'd stumbled into territory neither of them was prepared for. Questions that didn't have easy answers. Adriana stood up abruptly. I need to move. Can we go outside just for a minute? It's freezing out there. I know. I need to feel something real. She was already heading toward the door, pulling on her expensive heels that looked ridiculous with the borrowed sweatpants. Liam grabbed his coat and followed her, grabbing an extra jacket for her on the way out. They took the stairs down to the street level, their footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. When they emerged into the night, the cold hit them like a wall. Adriana tilted her face up toward the sky. Snow was still falling, lighter now, drifting down in lazy spirals. The street was quiet, peaceful in a way cities rarely were. No cars, no people, just the two of them and the muffled silence that came with fresh snow. It's beautiful, Adriana said. It's cold. She laughed and held out her hand, catching snowflakes on her palm. When's the last time you just stood outside and watched it snow? No agenda, no destination, just existing in it? Liam thought about it. I don't know. Years, probably. I'm usually too busy trying to get Mason somewhere, or get myself somewhere. Me too. Always somewhere to be. Always running late. She started walking down the sidewalk, her heels crunching in the snow. Everything in my life is scheduled down to the minute. Wake up at 5:30, work out from 6 to 7, breakfast while reviewing overnight reports, morning meeting starting at 8. I can tell you exactly where I'm supposed to be at any given moment for the next 6 months. But I couldn't tell you the last time I did something spontaneous. This is pretty spontaneous, Liam pointed out, walking beside her. This is insane. This is me having some kind of breakdown and dragging a stranger into it. I'm not a stranger anymore. She stopped walking and looked at him. No, I guess you're not. They stood there at the middle of the empty street, snow falling around them, and Liam felt something shift. A recognition of what was happening here, what had been happening since she'd knocked on his door. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This was two people finding each other at exactly the right moment, when they both needed someone to see them clearly. I should tell you something, Adriana said. When I left the gala tonight, when I got in my car and told my driver to lose whoever was following us, I had a moment where I thought about just disappearing, getting out at a random intersection and just walking away from everything. My phone, my security team, my responsibilities, all of it. Why didn't you? Because I'm a coward. Because it's easier to run to something than to run away from everything. She hugged the jacket tighter around herself. But then I got to your building, and I almost didn't knock. I stood outside your door for 5 minutes trying to talk myself into it, telling myself this was crazy, that I should just call Marcus and go home. But I knocked anyway. I'm glad you did. Are you? You could have had a quiet night alone. Instead, you got a neurotic billionaire crying about her problems and eating your food. You haven't cried, Liam pointed out. Give me time. They started walking again, no particular direction, just moving through the quiet streets. The city looked different like this, softer and cleaner than it ever did in daylight. Liam tried to remember the last time he'd taken a walk just to walk, not to get somewhere or accomplish something. He couldn't. What do you miss most? Adriana asked. About your wife? The question should have hurt, but it didn't. Not anymore. The little things, mostly. The way she'd hum while she was cooking, how she'd always steal my fries even when she ordered her own. The fact that I could look at her and know exactly what she was thinking without her having to say anything. He paused. I miss having someone who knew me well enough to call me on my bullshit. What bullshit would she call you on now? Liam considered. She'd tell me I'm using Mason as an excuse to not live my own life, that I'm hiding behind being a dad so I don't have to figure out who I am without her. She'd tell me to stop being so scared of everything. Are you? Scared of everything? Yeah, I'm scared of failing Mason. I'm scared of forgetting Sarah. I'm scared that this is all there is, that I'm going to wake up in 20 years and realize I never did anything that mattered beyond just getting through each day. That doesn't sound like surviving to me. That sounds like being paralyzed. The observation stung because it was true. Liam had convinced himself he was doing what needed to be done, that he was being responsible and strong, but maybe he was just stuck, unable to move forward or backward, frozen in a moment that had passed 3 years ago. What are you scared of? He asked. Adriana didn't answer right away. They'd reached a small park, just a patch of grass and a few benches, and she sat down on one of the benches despite the snow. Liam sat beside her. I'm scared that I'm going to spend my whole life building something that doesn't matter, she said finally. That I'm going to die alone in some sterile apartment, and they'll find me days later because nobody noticed I was gone. I'm scared that I've already missed my chance at having something real, that I've optimized and scheduled and strategized myself out of ever being truly happy. You're 29. You haven't missed anything, haven't I? I've spent the last 4 years doing nothing but work. I can count on one hand the number of times I've had a genuine conversation with someone who wasn't trying to sell me something or get something from me. I can't remember the last time I laughed until my stomach hurt or felt excited about anything that wasn't a quarterly earnings report. So change it. It's not that simple. Why not? Liam turned to face her. You're sitting here telling me you're miserable, that you're scared of wasting your life. So stop wasting it. Make different choices. I can't just walk away from my responsibilities. I'm not saying walk away. I'm saying make space for something else, something that's just for you, not for the company or the board or your father's legacy. Like what? I don't know. Whatever makes you feel alive. He gestured around them. This. Coming outside in the middle of the night to watch it snow. Doing something spontaneous and stupid and completely unproductive. Taking time to actually be a person instead of a position. Adriana was quiet, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. I don't remember how to do that. Be a person, I mean. I've been in performance mode for so long, I don't know what's real anymore. This is real, Liam said. Right now, sitting here, freezing our asses off and having an existential crisis on a park bench. This is real. She looked at him, and in the glow from the streetlight, he could see tears forming in her eyes. Not falling, just there, threatening. I don't cry, she said. Okay. I haven't cried in years, not since my father's stroke. I decided I couldn't afford to anymore, that it was a weakness I couldn't show. You don't have to cry, but you're allowed to if you want. I want to. Her voice cracked. I want to cry and scream and break something. I want to stop being so controlled all the time, but I don't know how to let go without completely falling apart. Maybe falling apart isn't the worst thing. Maybe you need to fall apart so you can put yourself back together differently. That's terrifying. Yeah, but is it more terrifying than spending the rest of your life like this? The tears finally spilled over, running down her cheeks in silent tracks. Adriana made no sound, didn't sob or gasp, just let them fall. Liam didn't try to comfort her or tell her it would be okay. He just sat with her, present and steady, while she finally let herself feel what she'd been holding back for so long. After a while, she wiped her face with her sleeve and laughed shakily. Well, that was embarrassing. It wasn't. I just cried in front of an employee. That's literally the worst thing I could do from a leadership perspective. I'm not an employee right now. I'm just someone who's sitting with you on a bench at 2 a.m. What are you then? Liam thought about it. A friend, maybe? I don't have friends. You do now. Adriana smiled, and it was real this time, reaching her eyes. You're very strange, Liam Carter. So are you, Adriana Vale. They sat for a few more minutes, neither of them ready to go back inside yet. The cold was seeping through Liam's coat, and his feet were going numb in his shoes, but he didn't care. This felt important somehow, This moment of connection with someone who understood what it was like to be lonely even when you weren't alone. "Can I tell you what I think?" Liam said. "Sure. I think you're running yourself into the ground because you're trying to prove something to people who are never going to be satisfied. I think you've tied your worth to your productivity, and now you can't separate who you are from what you do. And I think you're scared that if you stop long enough to actually feel what you're feeling, you'll realize how unhappy you've been." Adriana stared at him. "How did you—" "Because I do the same thing. Different circumstances, but same basic problem. I tell myself I'm being a good father, that I'm doing what needs to be done. But really, I'm just scared of figuring out what comes next. As long as I'm focused on Mason and getting through each day, I don't have to think about the fact that I'm lonely and stuck and not sure how to move forward. So what do we do?" "I have no idea. I'm barely keeping it together as it is." Adriana laughed, then stood up. "We should go back. I can't feel my toes anymore." They walked back to Liam's building in comfortable silence. The walk had done something, shifted something, broken through the careful walls they both maintained. When they got back to the apartment, Adriana went to the bathroom to wash her face while Liam made hot chocolate, the instant kind from a packet that Mason loved. When she emerged, her face scrubbed clean and red from the cold, she looked young and vulnerable and more real than she had all night. "Thank you," she said, accepting the mug. "For what?" "For not trying to fix me, for not offering solutions or telling me what I should do, for just listening. You don't need fixing. You need space to figure out what you actually want." They settled back into their spots, cradling the hot mugs and letting the warmth seep back into their bodies. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten, the deep black fading to dark blue. "It's almost morning," Adriana observed. "Yeah? I should go soon, face reality." "Probably," but neither of them moved. They sat there as the darkness slowly gave way to dawn, drinking hot chocolate and existing in the strange bubble they'd created, where the outside world and all its demands couldn't quite reach them yet. The sky continued its slow transformation from black to navy to the pale gray that preceded sunrise. Liam watched Adriana from across the room, the way she held the mug with both hands like she was afraid it might disappear if she let go. She'd gotten quiet again, lost in whatever thoughts were running through her head. "What happens when you go back?" he asked. She didn't pretend not to understand. "I go to my apartment, I shower, I put on a different dress, different armor. I call Marcus and tell him I'm fine, that I overreacted. I go into the office even though it's Christmas because there's always work to do. I smile at people who ask if I had a nice holiday. I pretend tonight never happened." "Does it have to be like that? What's the alternative? Tell everyone I spent Christmas Eve hiding in an employee's apartment because I had a panic attack at a gala? That'll do wonders for confidence in my leadership." "I'm not talking about telling everyone. I'm talking about letting this night mean something instead of just pretending it didn't happen." Adriana set her mug down on the coffee table. "And what should it mean, Liam? That I had a moment of weakness? That I broke down in front of someone I barely know? That I'm not as strong as everyone thinks I am? That you're human, that you're allowed to struggle, that maybe the way you've been doing things isn't working anymore?" "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple. Nothing about this is simple." Liam leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "But you came here for a reason. You didn't just pick my name randomly from a directory. You came because you needed something to change, even if you didn't know what." "I came because I was scared." "You came because you were scared of more than just some guy following you. You were scared of going back to your empty apartment and your empty life, and pretending everything was fine when it's not." Adriana's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about my life." "You're right, I don't. But I know what you've told me tonight. I know you cried for the first time in years sitting on a park bench at 2 a.m. I know you said you feel like you're dying inside. I know you can't remember the last time you felt like a person instead of a position." He paused. "Am I wrong about any of that?" She looked away, staring at the window where dawn was beginning to break. "No. So what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to fix this without breaking everything I've built." "Maybe you don't fix it. Maybe you just start making different choices, one at a time, until things start to look different." "Like what?" Liam thought about it. "Like taking a real day off. Not working from home, actually off. Like telling your assistant to block out time on your calendar that's just for you, non-negotiable. Like going to therapy and actually being honest instead of just managing your image. Those are all things that make me look weak. To who? The board? Your investors? Random people who don't know you and never will? He shook his head. The only person who thinks taking care of yourself is weak is you. Adriana stood up abruptly and walked to the window. The street below was still empty, but the sky was getting lighter by the minute. Soon the city would wake up, and the bubble they'd created would burst whether they wanted it to or not. I hate this, she said, her back to him. I hate that you're right. I hate that I came here and fell apart. I hate that I can't just go back to my life and pretend this was a weird anomaly. Why do you hate it? Because it means I have to change, and change is terrifying. Liam joined her at the window. Yeah, it is. But you know what's more terrifying? Waking up in 10 years and realizing nothing changed because you were too scared to try. They stood side by side, not touching, but close enough that Liam could feel the warmth radiating from her body. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who'd run out of words and were just existing together in the space they'd created. I should call Marcus, Adriana said finally. Let him know I'm alive and where to send a car. Okay. But she didn't reach for her phone. Instead, she turned to face him. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really let me stay? And don't say it's because you're a good person or you wanted to help. There has to be more to it than that. Liam considered the question honestly. Because I was lonely. Because I was sitting here in this apartment feeling sorry for myself, and then you showed up and reminded me that I'm not the only person who feels stuck and scared and unsure of what comes next. Because talking to you made me feel less alone than I've felt in 3 years, so I was a distraction. No, you were a reminder that life can still surprise you, that connections can happen when you least expect them, that maybe I'm not as stuck as I think I am. Adriana's expression softened. I felt the same way. Being here, talking to you, it's the first time in years I've felt like myself. Not the CEO version, not the public figure version. Just me. I like just you. I like just me too. I just don't know how to be her in the rest of my life. Maybe you start by being her more often, even if it's just for an hour here and there. She smiled sadly. You're very optimistic for someone who just told me he's barely holding it together. I'm not optimistic. I'm just tired of being miserable. Adriana's phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. She finally picked it up and looked at the screen. Marcus is threatening to send a team to every address I've ever looked at if I don't respond in the next 5 minutes. You should probably call him before he kicks down my door. She nodded, but didn't move to dial. Instead, she looked at Liam with an expression he couldn't quite read. When I leave here, when I go back to my life, what happens to this? To us? What do you want to happen? I don't know. Part of me wants to pretend this never happened, that we never had this conversation. Go back to being strangers who work for the same company and never interact. And the other part? The other part wants to see you again, wants to have more conversations like this, wants to figure out if the connection we felt tonight was real or just a product of circumstances. Liam's heart did something complicated in his chest. I'd like that too. But it's complicated. You're an employee. I'm the CEO. There are power dynamics and optics and a million reasons why this is a terrible idea. Those are all practical concerns. What do you actually want? Adriana laughed, but it sounded more like a sigh. I want to not have to think about practical concerns for once. I want to just do something because it feels right instead of because it makes strategic sense. Then do it. It's not that simple. Why not? Because everything in my life is connected to everything else. I can't just make decisions without thinking about consequences. I can't just... She broke off, frustrated. I can't be spontaneous. It's not who I am. You were spontaneous tonight. You ran from a gala and showed up at a stranger's door. That was different. I was panicking. Or maybe you were finally listening to what you actually wanted instead of what you thought you should want. Adriana opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She looked at her phone, then back at Liam. I'm going to do something crazy. Crazier than tonight? Maybe. She dialed Marcus, and Liam could hear it ring once before it was answered. Where the hell are you? Marcus's voice came through the phone loud enough that Liam could hear it from where he stood. I'm fine, Marcus. I'm safe. I'm with someone I trust. Who? That's not important. What's important is that I'm taking the day off. Christmas Day. I'm turning off my phone and I'm not coming into the office. I'm not checking emails. I'm not available. Adriana, we have the Decker call at 3. Reschedule it. The Japanese investors are expecting. They can wait 24 hours. Marcus, I'm taking a day. 1 day. If the company can't survive 1 day without me, then we have bigger problems than my availability. There was a long pause on the other end. Are you okay? No, but I'm working on it. Her voice softened. I need this, Marcus, please. Another pause. Okay, 1 day, but I want a check-in call tonight to confirm you're still alive. Deal. Thank you. She hung up before he could say anything else and looked at Liam with wide eyes. I just did that. I just told my head of security to reschedule investor calls and turned off my phone on Christmas Day. How does it feel? Terrifying, liberating, like I might throw up. She sat down heavily on the couch. What do I do now? Whatever you want. I don't know what I want. I haven't thought about what I want in years. Liam sat down beside her. Okay, let's start smaller. Are you hungry? I don't know. Maybe. Do you want to stay here or do you want to go somewhere? I don't have anywhere to go, and I'm still wearing your sweatpants. Fair point. Liam stood up. How about this? I'll make us breakfast. Actual breakfast, not leftover Chinese food. You can sit there and try to remember what it feels like to not be working, and then we'll figure out the rest as we go. Adriana looked at him like he'd just suggested they rob a bank. You're just going to make breakfast. That's your plan. It's Christmas morning. People make breakfast on Christmas morning. It's normal. I don't do normal. Today you do. He went to the kitchen before she could argue, pulling out eggs and bread and the half-empty carton of milk that was probably still good. He could feel Adriana watching him from the couch, her phone face down beside her like a bomb that might go off at any moment. Do you know how to cook? She called out. I can make eggs and toast without burning the building down. That counts as cooking. My chef makes eggs with Gruyere and fresh herbs and some kind of sauce that probably has a French name I can't pronounce. Well, I have cheddar cheese and some pepper, so prepare to be underwhelmed. He heard her laugh, and it made something warm bloom in his chest. He scrambled the eggs in a pan that had seen better days, added cheese because everything was better with cheese, and made toast in a toaster that only worked if you pressed the lever down exactly right. When he brought 2 plates over to the coffee table, Adriana was still sitting exactly where he'd left her, staring at her phone like it was a snake. You can put it away, he said. It won't kill you to be unreachable for a few hours. It might. But she picked it up and turned it off completely, not just silenced. The screen went dark, and she set it face down on the far side of the table. There, happy? Ecstatic. He handed her a plate. Eat. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The eggs were slightly overdone, and the toast was unevenly browned, but Adriana ate like it was the best meal she'd had in weeks. Maybe it was. Not because of the quality, but because it was simple and uncomplicated and she wasn't eating alone. This is weird, she said around a mouthful of eggs. Good weird or bad weird? I'm not sure yet. She set her fork down. I'm sitting in a stranger's apartment eating mediocre eggs on Christmas morning while my entire staff is probably panicking because I went dark. This should feel wrong, but it doesn't. Maybe that's telling you something. That I need better eggs? Liam smiled. That you need more of this. Simplicity, normalcy. Things that aren't optimized or strategic or calculated for maximum efficiency. Those things are boring. Are they? Or have you just convinced yourself they're boring because they don't fit into your idea of what a successful life looks like? Adriana picked up her fork again, but didn't eat. You sound like my therapist. Your therapist who you said doesn't help? She helps sometimes. When I actually listen instead of just waiting for the session to be over so I can get back to work. She took another bite. She told me once that I use productivity as a drug, that I keep myself busy so I don't have to feel anything. I told her she was oversimplifying. Was she? No, she was exactly right, and I hated her for saying it. They finished eating and Liam collected the plates. When he came back from the kitchen, Adriana had moved to the window again. The sun was fully up now, weak winter light filtering through the clouds. The street below was starting to show signs of life. A few cars, a person walking a dog. the city waking up to Christmas morning. "Do you have to pick up Mason today?" she asked. "Not until noon. His grandparents do Christmas breakfast, and then I get him for the rest of the day." "What do you usually do? For Christmas, I mean." "We open presents, watch movies. I make hot chocolate with too many marshmallows. We build whatever new toy he got that requires assembly." Liam joined her at the window. "Nothing fancy, just us." "It sounds nice." "It is, but it's also lonely sometimes. Being the only parent, the only adult, having nobody to share the moments with." "Do you think you'll ever get married again?" The question surprised him. "I don't know. Maybe. If I met someone who understood that Mason comes first, always. Someone who didn't expect me to be who I was before Sarah died, because that person doesn't exist anymore." "That's a high bar." "Yeah. Which is why I'm probably going to be alone for a long time." Adriana turned to look at him. "You don't seem like someone who should be alone." "Neither do you." They stood there looking at each other, and Liam felt the shift happen again. The air between them charged with something neither of them was quite ready to name. It would be easy to lean in, to close the distance, to see if the connection they felt was more than just emotional. But something held him back. This wasn't about that. This was about something deeper, something that would break if they rushed it. "I should probably get dressed," Adriana said, breaking the moment. "In actual clothes, not your college sweatshirt." "Right, your dress is on the couch." She retrieved it, the expensive fabric looking even more out of place in the morning light. She disappeared into the bathroom, and Liam heard the water running. When she emerged 15 minutes later, she was back in the navy gown, her hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, her makeup reapplied. She looked like Adriana Vale again, CEO, billionaire, untouchable. But Liam had seen the other version now. The one who cried on park benches and ate mediocre eggs and admitted she was scared. That version was still there, underneath the armor. "How do I look?" she asked. "Like you're ready to face the world." "I'm not. Nobody ever is." She walked over to him, and for a moment Liam thought she might hug him. Instead, she held out her hand for a formal handshake. He took it, and she held on longer than necessary. "Thank you," she said, "for tonight, for listening, for not judging, for reminding me that I'm allowed to be human." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. You gave me something I didn't know I needed." She released his hand. "I should call Marcus. Let him know I'm ready for a car." "Okay." She turned her phone back on, and it immediately started buzzing with notifications. She ignored all of them and called Marcus directly. The conversation was brief and businesslike. She gave him the address, told him 10 minutes, hung up. "He's sending a car," she said unnecessarily. "I figured." They stood in awkward silence, neither quite sure how to end this. How did you say goodbye to someone who'd seen parts of you that you never showed anyone? How did you go back to being strangers when you'd shared the kind of honesty that usually took years to build? "What happens now?" Liam asked. "With us, I mean. Do we just pretend this didn't happen?" Adriana bit her lip. "I don't know. Part of me thinks we should. It would be easier, cleaner. But I don't want to. I want to see you again. I want to have more conversations like this. I just don't know how to make that work in the real world. We could start with coffee. Something simple, no pressure. Coffee with the CEO. That won't raise any eyebrows. So we go somewhere nobody knows you. Some dive in a neighborhood where billionaires don't go." Adriana smiled. "You make it sound easy." "It could be, if you let it." Her phone buzzed with the text. She glanced at it. "Car's here." They walked to the door together. Adriana put her hand on the knob but didn't turn it. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Always. This was the best Christmas Eve I've had in years, maybe ever. And that's completely insane because I spent it hiding from a stalker and having an existential crisis in a stranger's apartment." "Not a stranger," Liam corrected. "Not a stranger," she agreed. She turned the knob and opened the door, then paused. "I'm going to kiss you now. Not because I think it's going to lead somewhere or because I want something from you, just because I want to, and I'm trying to do more things just because I want to." Before Liam could respond, she leaned in and pressed her lips to his. It was brief, chaste, nothing like the kind of kiss that would be in a movie. But it was real, and it made Liam's heart race in a way he hadn't felt since Sarah. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. Goodbye, Liam Carter. Goodbye, Adriana Vale. She walked out into the hallway, and Liam watched as she made her way to the stairs. At the landing, she turned back and gave him a small wave. Then she was gone, the sound of her heels fading as she descended. Liam closed the door and leaned against it. The apartment felt too quiet again, too empty, but different than before. Because now he knew what it felt like to fill it with someone else's presence. Now he knew that connection was still possible, that he wasn't as isolated as he'd convinced himself he was. He walked to the window and looked down at the street. A black town car was idling at the curb, and as he watched, Adriana emerged from the building. She paused before getting in, tilting her face up toward his window like she knew he'd be watching. She raised one hand in a final wave, and Liam waved back even though he wasn't sure she could see him. Then she got in the car, and it pulled away from the curb, disappearing into the Christmas morning traffic. Liam stood at the window for a long time after she was gone, watching the snow that had started falling again. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother-in-law asking what time he wanted to pick up Mason. He responded, then set the phone down. The apartment still smelled like coffee and hot chocolate. Adriana's mug was still on the coffee table, a ring of lipstick on the rim. The sweatshirt and sweatpants she'd worn were folded neatly on the arm of the couch. Small pieces of evidence that she'd been here, that last night had actually happened. Liam picked up the sweatshirt and held it for a moment before putting it back. He should wash it, put it away, erase the traces of the night. But he wasn't ready to do that yet. He wanted to hold on to the feeling a little longer, the sense that something had shifted, that maybe life could still surprise him. His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't his mother-in-law. It was an unknown number. "This is Adriana. I got your number from the employee directory. I know I said goodbye, but I wanted you to have a way to reach me. My personal number, not the office line. In case you want to take me up on that coffee, or just talk, or whatever. No pressure. Just wanted you to know the option exists." Liam read the message 3 times. Then he saved the number and typed back. "I'd like that. Coffee, I mean. After the holidays, when things settle down." The response came almost immediately. "Next Tuesday, 10 a.m. There's a place called Joe's on Spring Street. Nobody knows me there. I'll be the overdressed woman trying to blend in." Liam smiled. "I'll be the guy in the coffee-stained shirt trying not to look nervous." "Perfect. See you then." He set the phone down and looked around the apartment. It was still small, still cramped, still full of secondhand furniture and toys that needed organizing. But it felt different now. Less like a prison and more like a starting point. He had a few hours before he needed to pick up Mason. Enough time to shower, to clean up, to mentally prepare himself for the chaos of a 5-year-old on Christmas morning. Enough time to sit with what had happened last night and what it might mean. But mostly, he just sat at the window and watched the snow fall, thinking about a woman in a navy dress who'd knocked on his door and reminded him that he was still capable of feeling something other than grief and exhaustion. That connection was possible. That maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as stuck as he thought he was. The city continued to wake up around him. Lights turned on in windows across the street. People emerged from buildings, bundled against the cold, heading to wherever they needed to be on Christmas morning. The world kept turning, indifferent to the small miracle that had happened in Liam's apartment the night before. But Liam knew, and Adriana knew, and that was enough for now. He stood up and started getting ready for the day, his movements lighter than they'd been in years. Mason would be excited about his presence, would want to build things and play games and watch movies. Liam would be present for all of it, would try to be the father Mason deserved. But part of his mind would be on Tuesday. On a coffee shop called Joe's on Spring Street, on a woman who'd shown him a part of herself she kept hidden from the world, on the possibility that maybe, just maybe, both of them could find a way to be a little less lonely. The days between Christmas and Tuesday felt longer than they should have. Liam went through the motions, playing with Mason, cleaning the apartment, going back to work after the holiday weekend, but his mind kept drifting to that night, to the conversations, the honesty, the way Adriana had looked at him when she said goodbye, to that brief kiss that had felt like a promise of something he wasn't sure either of them was ready for. He checked his phone too often, wondering if she'd cancel, wondering if she'd come to her senses and realize that whatever had happened on Christmas Eve was just an anomaly, a strange moment out of time that didn't translate to the real world. But Tuesday morning came, and the text arrived at 9:15. "Still on for 10? I'm nervous. Is that weird?" Liam typed back quickly. Not weird. I'm nervous too. Okay, see you soon. He dropped Mason off at preschool, fielded questions from one of the other parents about his holiday, and drove to Spring Street with his heart doing uncomfortable things in his chest. Joe's Coffee was exactly the kind of place Adriana had described. A hole in the wall with mismatched furniture and a chalkboard menu that looked like it hadn't been updated in 5 years. Not the kind of place where you'd expect to find a billionaire CEO. He got there 10 minutes early and ordered a regular coffee, then sat at a table in the back where he could see the door. His leg bounced under the table, nervous energy he couldn't quite contain. This was insane. He was meeting his boss's 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 boss for coffee. He should have said no. He should have let Christmas Eve stay in the past where it belonged. But then Adriana walked through the door, and Liam forgot all the reasons this was a bad idea. She dressed down, jeans, a sweater, a coat that probably still cost more than his rent, but didn't scream wealth. Her hair was loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in her usual severe style. She wore sunglasses even though it wasn't sunny, probably trying to avoid recognition. She looked around the coffee shop with the air of someone entering unfamiliar territory, then spotted Liam and headed over. "Hi," she said, slipping into the chair across from him. "Hi." They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Without the urgency of Christmas Eve, without the fear and vulnerability that had stripped away their usual defenses, they were just two people who barely knew each other trying to figure out what to say. "Do you want coffee?" Liam asked finally. "Yes, please." Something normal. He went to the counter and ordered her a regular coffee, black, because he remembered she'd drink it however it came. When he returned, she'd taken off the sunglasses and was looking around the coffee shop with genuine curiosity. "I don't think I've ever been somewhere like this," she said. "What, a coffee shop?" "A normal coffee shop. The places I usually go have specialty roasts and oat milk options and baristas who know my order by heart. This is," she gestured around, "different. Good different or bad different?" "I'm still deciding." She accepted the coffee he handed her and took a sip. "Okay, it's good different. This tastes like actual coffee, not some over-engineered approximation of what coffee should be." Liam sat back down. "So how was the rest of your Christmas?" Adriana laughed, but it sounded strained. "Weird. I went back to my apartment and it felt wrong. Too clean, too quiet, too much like a hotel room. I kept thinking about your apartment with all the photos and the toys, and the proof that someone actually lives there." "You could put up photos?" "Of what?" "I don't have photos. I mean, I have professional headshots and images from events, but I don't have the kind of candid shots you have of Mason. I don't have memories captured like that. You could start making some." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "That's what I've been thinking about since Christmas. About what you said, about making different choices. I took the rest of Christmas Day off like I said I would. Turned off my phone, didn't check email, and it was excruciating." "Because you missed work?" "Because I didn't know what to do with myself. I sat in my apartment for hours just existing, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd done that. Just sat without a purpose or a goal or a task to complete. It felt wrong, like I was wasting time." "Were you?" Liam asked. "Wasting time? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I'm so broken that I've forgotten how to just be." She took another sip of coffee. "I called my therapist the next day. Had an emergency session, told her everything about Christmas Eve, about you, about running, about crying on a park bench." "What did she say?" "She said it sounded like a breakthrough, that I'd finally let myself feel what I've been avoiding for years. Then she asked me what I was going to do about it." Adriana looked at him directly. "I didn't have an answer." "Do you have one now?" "Sort of. I'm trying to make small changes. I blocked out 2 hours every Thursday on my calendar, marked them as non-negotiable personal time. I told my assistant to stop scheduling breakfast meetings because I want to actually eat breakfast instead of working through it. I started saying no to things that don't matter." "That's good. It's terrifying. Every time I say no, I feel like I'm failing, like I'm proving everyone right who said I couldn't handle this job." She set her mug down. "But then I think about what you said, about dying a little bit every day. And I realize that failing at being a CEO is less scary than failing at being a person." Liam didn't know what to say to that. The honesty in her voice was almost painful, like she was pulling something out of herself that hurt to expose. What about you? Adriana asked. How was your Christmas with Mason? Good. He got a dinosaur set that we spent 3 hours building. He was so excited he could barely sit still. Liam smiled at the memory. We watched movies, ate too much candy, fell asleep on the couch. Normal stuff. Sounds perfect. It was. But it was also lonely in a way I haven't let myself acknowledge before. Watching him open presents and knowing Sarah should be there. Knowing he should have both parents, not just me struggling to be enough. You are enough, Adriana said firmly. How would you know? Because you showed up. Because you're trying. Because you love him enough to question whether you're doing it right. She leaned forward. Bad parents don't worry about being bad parents. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just fooling myself into thinking I'm doing okay when I'm actually screwing him up. Join the club. I'm pretty sure we're all screwing something up. They fell into silence again, but this time it was more comfortable. The coffee shop hummed with low conversation around them, other people's lives intersecting briefly with their own. Can I ask you something? Adriana said. And you can tell me if I'm overstepping. Sure. Why did you let me kiss you? On Christmas Eve, I mean. You could have stopped me. Liam thought about it. Because I wanted you to. Because it felt right. Because for the first time since Sarah died, I felt something other than grief and exhaustion when I looked at someone. And now? Do you regret it? No. Do you? No. But I'm also not sure what it means, if it means anything. She twisted her napkin between her fingers. I'm not good at this. At people, at relationships, at anything that isn't work. I don't know how to navigate whatever this is. Neither do I. So what do we do? Liam considered the question carefully. We could just see what happens. No expectations, no pressure, just two people who connected on a weird night trying to figure out if that connection means something in the real world. That's very rational. Is that bad? No, it's just unexpected. I'm usually the one being rational while everyone else is being emotional. She looked at him with something that might have been respect. You're different than I expected. Different how? More grounded, more self-aware. I thought you'd be intimidated by me or trying to use this as an opportunity to advance your career, but you're just being real. Would you rather I be intimidated? No, this is better. Harder, but better. A couple came into the coffee shop laughing about something. They ordered at the counter, the woman leaning into the man's shoulder while they waited. There was an ease between them that came from years of knowing each other, from shared history and inside jokes. Liam felt a pang of something that might have been envy. What are you thinking? Adriana asked. That I miss that. The casual intimacy. Having someone who knows you well enough that you don't have to explain everything. Sarah? Yeah, we weren't perfect. We fought about stupid things like whose turn it was to do dishes or whether we could afford to go on vacation. But we knew each other. I could tell what kind of day she'd had by the way she said hello when she got home. She knew I was stressed when I started rearranging things that didn't need rearranging. That sounds nice. It was. Until it wasn't anymore. Until she was gone and I had to figure out how to be a person without her. Adriana reached across the table and put her hand on his. I'm sorry that you lost that. That Mason lost that. Her hand was warm and Liam had to resist the urge to turn his palm up and hold hers properly. This wasn't that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What about your parents? He asked, gently changing the subject. You said your mom died when you were 16. Adriana withdrew her hand. Cancer. Ovarian. She fought it for 2 years before it won. I watched her disappear piece by piece until she wasn't the person I knew anymore. That must have been hard. It made me angry. Not at her, at everything. At doctors who couldn't save her, at a world that lets people suffer like that, at myself for not being able to fix it. She stared into her coffee. My father threw himself into work after she died. I think it was the only way he knew how to cope. So I did the same. Studied harder, worked harder, achieved more. Thought that if I was successful enough, it would somehow make up for losing her. Did it? No. It just made me good at running from feelings I didn't want to deal with. She looked up at him. Until you. Until Christmas Eve when I couldn't run anymore because I'd literally run out of places to go. I'm glad you ended up at my door. Me too, even though it was insane, even though I still can't quite believe I did it. Liam finished his coffee. Do you want to walk? There's a park a few blocks from here. In the cold? You seem to like it on Christmas Eve. Adriana smiled. Okay, let's walk. They left the coffee shop and headed toward the park, walking side by side but not touching. The morning was gray and cold, threatening more snow but not quite delivering yet. Other people passed them on the sidewalk. Runners, dog walkers, people heading to work, but nobody gave them a second glance. Here, they were just two people taking a walk, not a CEO and an employee, not a billionaire and a single father, just two people. This is nice, Adriana said after a while, being anonymous. You're not always? Never. There's always someone watching, someone ready to take a photo or ask for something. I can't go to a grocery store without it ending up in some blog post about what billionaires buy. I can't have a bad day in public without it becoming a story about my leadership. That sounds exhausting. It is. That's why I have groceries delivered and bad days in private. She shoved her hands in her coat pockets. But I chose this. I knew what I was signing up for when I took over the company. Did you, though? Know what you were signing up for? I thought I did. I thought being CEO would be like being a VP, but with more authority. I didn't understand that it would mean giving up any semblance of privacy or personal life, that every decision would be scrutinized, every mistake magnified, every success attributed to my team, while every failure was mine alone. They reached the park, a small green space with bare trees and empty benches. They found one that was relatively clean and sat down. The bench was cold even through their coats, but neither of them moved to leave. Do you ever wish you'd said no? Liam asked, when your father asked you to take over? Every day. But then I think about what would have happened if I had. The board would have brought in someone from outside, someone who didn't understand what my father built, or why it mattered. They would have gutted it for profit, laid off thousands of people, destroyed something that took decades to create. She pulled her coat tighter. So I said yes. And I've been paying for it ever since. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. You of all people should know that. Liam couldn't argue with that. Fair would have meant Sarah lived. Fair would have meant Mason had both his parents. Fair would have meant a lot of things that weren't real. What would you tell your younger self? He asked. If you could go back to the moment before you said yes? Adriana thought about it for a long time. I'd tell her to negotiate better terms, to demand that the board respect her autonomy, to set boundaries from the beginning instead of trying to prove herself by being available every hour of every day. She paused. But I don't know if she would have listened. She was so desperate to make her father proud, to prove she could do it. She would have said yes to anything. And now, if you could renegotiate? I don't know if I have that leverage anymore. I've set a precedent. If I suddenly start demanding work-life balance and personal boundaries, the board will see it as weakness. Or they'll see it as strength, as someone who knows what they need to be effective long-term. You have a lot of faith in corporate boards. I have faith in you, that you're smart enough to figure out how to get what you need without sacrificing everything you've built. Adriana looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Why do you believe in me? You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're capable of being honest about your struggles. I know you're willing to make changes even when they're scary. I know you showed up here today even though it would have been easier to cancel and pretend Christmas Eve never happened. I almost did cancel. I had the text drafted and everything. Something came up at work. Can we reschedule? The perfect excuse. What changed your mind? I realized I was doing exactly what I always do, running from something that might be good because it doesn't fit into my perfectly controlled life. She turned to face him. You scare me, Liam. I scare you? You make me want things I've convinced myself I can't have. You make me question whether the sacrifices I've made are worth it. You make me feel things I've spent years teaching myself not to feel. Is that bad? I don't know yet. She stood up. Walk with me? They left the bench and wandered deeper into the park. A few pigeons scattered as they approached, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The world continued around them, indifferent to the conversation they were having. I have to tell you something, Adriana said, and I need you to really hear it. Okay. I can't promise you anything. I can't promise this will work, or that I'll be good at it, or that I won't get scared and run again. I can't promise I'll always make you a priority, or that I'll be able to give you what you need. All I can promise is that I'll try, that I'll show up when I say I will, that I'll be honest even when it's hard, Liam stopped walking. Is this you saying you want to try? Whatever this is? I think so. Maybe. Yes. She laughed nervously. I'm not used to being uncertain about things. Join the club. But I need you to understand something. My life is complicated. If we do this, if we try this, it can't be public. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The optics of the CEO dating an employee would be a nightmare. I'm not asking you to date me publicly. I'm not asking you to date me at all, actually. I'm just asking if we can keep seeing each other, keep talking. See if this feeling we both have means something. What feeling? That we're less alone when we're together. Adriana's eyes softened. Yeah, that feeling. They started walking again, slower this time. The park opened up into a small pond, frozen over and covered in snow. A few ducks huddled near the edge where the ice was thinnest, and Liam wondered why they hadn't flown south for the winter. What do we do now? Adriana asked. Practically speaking, we could meet like this. Coffee, walks, places where nobody's looking for you. We could text, call when you have time. We could just be two people getting to know each other without all the complications. That's incredibly naive. Probably, but what's the alternative? We acknowledge that this is complicated and impossible, and we both go back to our separate lonely lives? When you put it like that, naive doesn't sound so bad. Liam's phone buzzed. He pulled it out and checked the screen. I need to pick up Mason in half an hour. Preschool ends early on Tuesdays. Right, of course. Adriana looked disappointed but tried to hide it. I should get back anyway. I have meetings this afternoon. They walked back toward the entrance of the park in silence. When they reached the street, they stood awkwardly, neither quite sure how to say goodbye. Can I see you again? Liam asked. Same time next week? I'd like that. But I can't promise Tuesday will work. My schedule gets complicated. Then text me when you have time. I'll make it work. Adriana smiled. You'd rearrange your life for coffee with me? If it means not feeling alone for an hour, yeah, I would. She stepped closer and kissed him again, longer this time, but still careful, still testing the waters. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed. I'll text you, she said. Okay? I mean it. I'm not going to disappear. I believe you. She started to walk away, then turned back. Liam? Yeah? Thank you for this, for giving me a reason to try. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. Then she was gone, disappearing around a corner and leaving Liam standing alone on the sidewalk. He checked his phone, 20 minutes until he needed to pick up Mason. Enough time to get back to his car. Enough time to transition from whatever this was into being a father again. He drove to the preschool on autopilot, his mind replaying the conversation. The kiss. The promise to try. The uncertainty of what came next. It felt fragile, like something that could break with one wrong move, but it also felt real in a way nothing had felt in years. Mason came running out of the building with a drawing clutched in his hand, shouting about how they'd learned about penguins today. Liam caught him in a hug, listening to the breathless retelling of penguin facts, and felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle back onto his shoulders. This was his real life. Mason, work, the daily grind of single parenthood. Everything else was just borrowed time. But as he buckled Mason into his car seat and listened to more penguin facts, Liam realized that the borrowed time didn't make it less valuable. If anything, it made it more precious. Those hours with Adriana, those conversations that made him feel seen and understood, they mattered precisely because they were separate from the rest of his life. They were his, in a way nothing else was. Dad, are you listening? Mason asked. Yeah, buddy. Penguins huddle together to stay warm. And the dads hold the eggs on their feet. Can you believe that? Liam smiled. Yeah, I can believe that. Dads do whatever they need to do to take care of their kids. Even stand in the cold forever? Even that. They drove home through the gray afternoon, Mason chattering away while Liam navigated traffic and thought about complicated things like connection and loneliness, and whether it was possible to be enough for everyone who needed him. He didn't have answers. He probably never would. But for the first time in years, he felt like maybe he didn't need all the answers right now. Maybe it was enough to just keep showing up, keep trying, keep letting people in, even when it scared him. His phone buzzed at a red light. He glanced at it quickly. Today was good. Let's do it again soon, maybe Thursday? I have that personal time blocked out, and I'd rather spend it with you than staring at my apartment walls. Liam waited until he was parked at their building before responding. Thursday works. Same place? Same place. And Liam? I'm glad we're doing this, whatever this is. Me too. He pocketed his phone and helped Mason out of the car, listening to more penguin facts as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. The door still stuck the same way. The heating unit still rattled. The dishes from breakfast were still in the sink. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. But something had shifted. The loneliness that usually greeted him when he walked through the door felt less oppressive. The silence felt less empty. Because now he knew that Thursday was coming, and with it another chance to be seen, to connect, to feel like himself instead of just a collection of roles and responsibilities. Mason ran to his room to play with his dinosaurs, and Liam went to the kitchen to start dinner. As he chopped vegetables for pasta sauce, he thought about Adriana sitting in her office or her apartment, trying to navigate the same complicated feelings he was, trying to figure out how to make space for something that didn't fit neatly into the life she'd built. He hoped she'd figure it out. He hoped they both would. Because the alternative, going back to the way things were before Christmas Eve, felt impossible now. He'd tasted what connection felt like again, and he wasn't ready to give that up. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Thursday came, and then another Thursday, and then a month of Thursdays. They fell into a pattern: coffee at Joe's, walks through the park, conversations that stretched longer than either of them planned. Sometimes Adriana could only spare an hour between meetings. Sometimes they spent the whole afternoon together, losing track of time until Liam's phone reminded him to pick up Mason or Adriana got a call she couldn't ignore. They talked about everything and nothing. Adriana told him about board meetings that felt like battles, about innovation she wanted to pursue but couldn't get approved, about her father's decline, and how visiting him felt like mourning someone who was still alive. Liam told her about Mason's questions he didn't know how to answer, about the mortgage payment that kept him up at night, about the way grief snuck up on him at random moments, a song on the radio, a stranger's laugh that sounded like Sarah's. They didn't talk about what they were doing, what this was. Labels felt dangerous, like they might break the fragile thing they were building, but it was becoming something. Liam could feel it in the way his chest tightened when his phone buzzed with her name, in the way Thursday mornings felt different from other mornings, charged with anticipation, in the way he caught himself thinking about what she'd said days later, turning her words over in his mind like stones he was trying to understand. And then, 6 weeks after Christmas, everything shifted. Liam was at work when his phone rang. Adriana's name on the screen. She never called during work hours. Too risky, too many people around who might overhear. His stomach dropped. Hello? Can you meet me? Her voice was tight, controlled in a way that meant she was barely holding it together. Now, I know it's not Thursday, but I just need to not be alone right now. Where are you? My apartment. I'm sending you the address, please. The line went dead. Liam stared at his phone, then at the spreadsheet on his computer screen. He had reports due, emails to answer, a meeting in 45 minutes. But none of that mattered. He grabbed his coat and left. The address she'd sent was in a part of the city Liam rarely visited, the kind of neighborhood where doormen wore uniforms and buildings had names instead of numbers. He felt out of place in his work clothes, but the doorman barely glanced at him before calling up to confirm he was expected. Adriana's apartment was on the 20th floor. When she opened the door, Liam understood why she'd called. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy. She'd been crying for a while. What happened? He asked. She pulled him inside and closed the door. The apartment was exactly what he'd expected. Expensive, pristine, utterly impersonal. Like a showroom nobody actually lived in. My father died this morning, she said flatly. Stroke. The third one. The nurses said he went peacefully, but I don't know what that means. How do they know if it was peaceful? He couldn't talk. Couldn't tell them if he was scared or in pain or... Her voice broke. Liam pulled her into a hug. She resisted for a second, then collapsed against him, her whole body shaking with sobs she'd probably been holding back since she got the call. They stood like that for a long time, Adriana crying into his shoulder while Liam held her and said nothing because there was nothing to say. Death didn't care about preparation or readiness. It came when it came, and all you could do was survive it. Eventually, she pulled back, wiping her face with her hands. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have called you. You were at work, and this isn't your problem, and I just— Stop, Liam said firmly. You called because you needed someone. That's allowed. That's normal. Nothing about this is normal. I'm supposed to be handling this, making arrangements, calling board members, managing the optics. Instead, I'm falling apart in my apartment and dragging you into it. Adriana, your father just died. You're allowed to fall apart. She laughed bitterly. Am I? Because I've spent the last 6 weeks trying to convince the board I'm stable and capable and ready to lead the company through our next phase of growth. If they find out I'm having a breakdown, they'll use it against me. They'll say I'm too emotional, too unstable, that I need to step down. Then don't tell them, but don't pretend with me. Not here. She looked at him with something that might have been gratitude or desperation or both. I don't know what to do. The nurse said I should come to the facility to say goodbye, but he's already gone. What's the point? And there's paperwork and funeral arrangements, and I need to draft a statement for the press, and I can't think about any of it because all I can think about is how I spent the last 4 years being too busy to visit him more than once a month. You were running a company. That's not an excuse. He was dying, and I chose board meetings over him. I chose earnings reports over sitting with him. I told myself I was doing it for him, honoring his legacy, but really I was just avoiding watching him disappear. Liam guided her to the couch and sat beside her. You did what you could with what you had. That's all anyone can do. It wasn't enough. It never feels like enough. When Sarah died, I replayed that whole day 1,000 times, looking for something I could have done differently. If I'd called her 5 minutes earlier, if I'd asked her to pick something up on the way home, if I'd kept her on the phone longer, maybe she wouldn't have been at that intersection at that exact moment. Maybe she'd still be alive. But you know that's not rational. Knowing something isn't rational doesn't stop you from feeling it. Liam took her hand. You're going to torture yourself with what-ifs. That's part of grief. But eventually you'll realize that you did the best you could with an impossible situation. That loving someone doesn't mean being perfect. Adriana squeezed his hand. I didn't love him at the end. I resented him. For getting sick, for putting this burden on me, for dying before I could prove to him that I was good enough. You think he didn't already know you were good enough? I think he died disappointed that I chose the company over everything else. Over relationships, over happiness, over having a life. He used to tell me not to make the same mistakes he did, but I didn't listen. I became exactly like him, married to work, isolated, unable to connect with people. You're connecting now. With me. Am I? Or am I just using you as an escape from a life I don't know how to fix? The question hung between them. Liam didn't have an answer, and he wasn't sure Adriana wanted one. Why don't you get out of here? He said finally. You don't have to go to the facility if you're not ready. You don't have to make decisions right now. Just get away from this apartment and all the things you're supposed to be doing. Where would I go? My place. It's small and messy and completely unimpressive, but it's real. You can just exist there without performing. Adriana looked around her apartment. The white walls, the expensive furniture, the absence of anything personal. Okay, let's go. They took a cab to Liam's building, Adriana staring out the window the whole way. She'd put on sunglasses again, hiding her red eyes from the world. When they got to his apartment, she looked around like she was seeing it for the first time, even though she'd been there on Christmas Eve. I forgot how different this is from my place, she said. Different bad? Different real. She picked up one of Mason's toy dinosaurs from the coffee table. You can tell people actually live here, that there's joy here, even when things are hard. Liam made tea because that's what people did when someone was grieving, even though neither of them really wanted it. They sat on the couch, the same spots they'd occupied on Christmas Eve, and the silence felt familiar instead of awkward. I need to tell you something, Adriana said after a while, and I need you to be honest with me about how you feel about it. Okay? The board is going to expect me to use my father's death as an opportunity to consolidate power, to make changes, bring in my own people, reshape the company in my image. It's what he would have done. Is it what you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to prove that I can be ruthless when I need to be, that I'm not soft or weak or too emotional, but another part of me wonders if that's just becoming more of what I already hate about this job. So don't do it. Do something different. Like what? I don't know. What would make the job feel less like a prison and more like something you chose? Adriana was quiet for a long time. I'd bring in a co-CEO, someone who could handle the operational side while I focused on innovation and long-term strategy. I'd restructure my schedule so I'm not working 80-hour weeks. I'd implement some of the employee benefit programs I wanted to do 4 years ago but couldn't get approved. So do that. The board will fight me, then fight back. You said yourself that you're succeeding by every metric. Use that leverage. Make them understand that if they want you to stay, things have to change. And if they say no, then you walk away, start something new, do something that doesn't require you to sacrifice everything. Adriana looked at him like he'd suggested she jump off a building. I can't just walk away. This company is my father's legacy. It's everything he built. It's also the thing that's killing you. And he's gone now, Adriana. You don't have to prove anything to him anymore. You only have to answer to yourself. She set her tea down, her hands shaking slightly. That's the most terrifying thing anyone's ever said to me. Because it's true? Because I don't know who I am if I'm not doing this. I've been CEO for 4 years. Before that, I was VP grooming to be CEO. Before that, I was in business school preparing to join the company. I've spent my entire adult life building toward this role. If I'm not Adriana Vale, CEO, then who am I? Maybe that's something you need to figure out. I don't know how. Liam thought about the past 6 weeks, about the version of Adriana he'd gotten to know during their Thursday meetings. I think you're already figuring it out. The woman who takes 2-hour blocks of personal time and meets me for coffee and cries on park benches, that's you too, not just the CEO, you. That woman doesn't feel real. She feels like a luxury I can't afford. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you've convinced yourself that being human is a luxury instead of a necessity. Adriana leaned back against the couch, exhausted. I hate that you're right about everything. I'm not right about everything. I'm barely right about anything. But I know what it's like to get stuck in a role because it's the only thing you know how to be. And I know that at some point, you have to decide if that role is worth what it's costing you. What did you decide with being a single father? That it's worth it because Mason needs me. But that I also need to be more than just his dad. That I need to have something for myself, even if it's just Thursday mornings drinking coffee with someone who makes me feel less alone. Is that all this is to you? Thursday mornings? Liam met her eyes. You know it's not. Then what is it? I don't know. Something important. Something I don't want to lose. Adriana moved closer to him on the couch. I don't want to lose it either. But I'm scared that if we keep doing this, if we let this become something real, one of us is going to get hurt. Probably you, because I don't know how to not hurt people. You're not hurting me. Not yet, but I will. I'll get busy or scared or overwhelmed and I'll pull away. I'll disappoint you. I'll prove that I'm exactly as broken as I think I am. Or maybe you won't. Maybe you'll surprise yourself. I don't want to risk it. I don't want to risk you. Liam took her hand again. Life is risk, Adriana. Loving people is risk. Sarah died, and it destroyed me. But I don't regret loving her. I don't regret the life we had, even though losing it hurt more than anything I've ever experienced. Because the alternative, never loving anyone, never connecting, never taking the risk, that's not living. That's just existing. Tears were sliding down her face again. I don't know how to do this. How to let someone in. You're already doing it, right now. You called me when your father died. You let me see you fall apart. You're here, being honest about your fears. That's letting me in. It doesn't feel like enough. It is enough. Everything else we figure out as we go. She kissed him then, desperate and messy and nothing like the careful kisses they'd shared before. This was grief and fear and need all tangled together. Liam kissed her back, holding her close, trying to communicate through touch what he couldn't quite put into words. When they finally pulled apart, Adriana rested her forehead against his. I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell the board I want changes, real changes, not just token adjustments. Yeah? Yeah. And if they say no, I'll walk away. I'll find something else. Something that doesn't require me to be miserable to be successful. What brought this on? You. This. The realization that I've been so focused on not disappointing my father that I never asked myself if I was disappointed in the life I was living. She pulled back to look at him. I don't want to wake up in 20 years and realize I wasted my life proving something to people who never really cared about me. So don't. It's not that simple. It is that simple. It's just not easy. Adriana laughed through her tears. When did you become so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just tired of being afraid. They spent the rest of the afternoon on that couch, talking and not talking, existing together in the quiet. Liam told her about the time Mason asked if he could have a new mom, and how Liam had to explain that people weren't replaceable, that you didn't get a new mom just because the old one died. Adriana told him about the last conversation she'd had with her father, how he'd tried to say something but couldn't form the words, and how she'd pretended to understand even though she had no idea what he wanted. By the time Liam had to pick up Mason, Adriana looked more settled. Not okay. Nobody was okay after losing a parent, but more grounded. Like she'd remembered that she was allowed to be human. I should go, she said. Face reality. Make the calls I've been avoiding. You want me to come with you? No, but thank you for offering. She stood up, smoothing down her clothes. Can I see you Thursday? Our regular time? Of course. Good. I need that. Something normal in the middle of all this chaos. Liam walked her to the door. You're going to get through this. It's going to be hard. And it's going to hurt, but you'll survive it. How do you know? Because you survived everything else. Because you're stronger than you think you are. She kissed him one more time, soft and brief. Thank you for today, for all of it. Anytime. The next few weeks were hard for Adriana. Liam watched from a distance as she navigated her father's funeral, the media coverage, the board meetings where everything was decided. She texted him late at night, brief messages that let him know she was still there, still fighting. Board meeting tomorrow. Wish me luck. Luck. You've got this. Funeral was awful. Too many people who didn't actually care about him. I'm sorry. Call me if you need to talk. Can't tonight. Drowning in work. Thursday still on? Always. When Thursday came, she looked different. Tired still, but also lighter somehow. Like she'd put down something she'd been carrying for too long. I did it, she said as soon as she sat down at Joe's. I told the board I wanted a co-CEO and restructured hours and budget for employee programs. I told them if they wanted me to stay, those were my terms. What did they say? They said no. Then I stood up to leave and they panicked, realized I was serious. We negotiated for 3 hours, but I got most of what I wanted. Co-CEO starts in 2 months, employee programs get funded, and I'm cutting my hours from 80 a week to 50. 50 is still a lot. It's progress. She smiled, and it was real. I also told them I was taking 3 weeks off, starting next Monday, non-negotiable. What are you going to do with 3 weeks? I don't know. That's kind of the point. Maybe travel. Maybe just sleep. Maybe figure out who I am when I'm not working. She looked at him carefully. Maybe spend some time with you, if you want. Mason has preschool most days. I have work. I can't just take 3 weeks off. I know. I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking if you want to spend time together when you're available. Real time, not just Thursday mornings. Dinners, maybe. Weekends. Meeting Mason. Liam's heart did something complicated. You want to meet Mason? If that's okay, if you think it's time. I know it's a big step, and I don't want to confuse him or make things complicated, but I also don't want to keep hiding this. Whatever this is. What is this? Adriana took a breath. I think it's me trying to have a life outside of work. I think it's me caring about someone and wanting to see where it goes. I think it's me being terrified but doing it anyway because the alternative is being alone forever. That's a lot. Too much? No, it's perfect. Liam reached across the table and took her hand. I want you to meet Mason. I want to see where this goes. I want to do the terrifying thing with you. Yeah? Yeah. They sat there grinning at each other like idiots until the barista called out an order and broke the moment. So when? Adriana asked. When should I meet him? This weekend, Saturday. We usually go to the Children's Museum. You could come with us. A children's museum? I haven't been to one of those in 20 years. It's loud and chaotic and full of sticky children. You'll hate it. I can't wait. Saturday came faster than Liam expected. He told Mason that a friend was joining them, someone who worked at Dad's company. Mason had accepted this with the easy grace of a 5-year-old who didn't question adult friendships. When Adriana arrived at the museum entrance, she looked nervous. She'd dressed down again, jeans, a sweater, sneakers, but she still stood out in a way that made Liam smile. Some people just couldn't help looking expensive. "Hey," she said. "Hey yourself." Liam gestured to Mason, who was examining a poster about dinosaur exhibits. "Mason, come meet my friend Adriana." Mason ran over, all boundless 5-year-old energy. "Hi, do you like dinosaurs?" "I like dinosaurs. My favorite is the Ankylosaurus because it has a club on its tail and it could smash things." Adriana knelt down to his level. "Hi, Mason. I like dinosaurs too. I think my favorite is the pterodactyl because it could fly." "That's a good one." "But actually, pterodactyls aren't technically dinosaurs. They're flying reptiles. Dad told me that." "Did he? Well, your dad is very smart." Mason beamed. "Come on, I'll show you the dinosaur room." He grabbed Adriana's hand and pulled her toward the entrance. She looked back at Liam with an expression that was half panic, half delight. Liam just shrugged and followed. They spent 3 hours in that museum. Mason dragged them from exhibit to exhibit, narrating everything in breathless detail. Adriana listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Mason light up even more. She helped him build a bridge in the engineering section. She pretended to be scared when he roared at her in the dinosaur exhibit. She sat through a puppet show about recycling and clapped enthusiastically at the end. When they stopped for lunch in the museum cafeteria, Mason was still chattering away while Adriana looked pleasantly exhausted. "You're good with him," Liam said quietly while Mason was distracted by his chicken nuggets. "He makes it easy. He's a great kid. He likes you. I like him too." She smiled, and Liam saw something in her expression he'd never seen before. Contentment, maybe. Or just the simple pleasure of being present in a moment without thinking about what came next. After lunch, Mason's energy finally started to flag. They left the museum and walked to a nearby park, where Mason played on the swings while Liam and Adriana sat on a bench watching him. "Thank you for this," Adriana said, "for letting me be part of your day. Thank you for wanting to be part of it. I meant what I said, about wanting to see where this goes, about wanting to try. I know you did. But I also need to be honest with you about something." Liam's stomach tightened. "Okay. I'm still going to mess up. I'm still going to get overwhelmed and pull away sometimes. I'm still going to choose work when I shouldn't. I'm still learning how to do this, and I'm probably going to be bad at it for a while. Adriana, let me finish. I'm going to be bad at this, but I'm going to keep trying, because you and Mason, what you have here, this life you've built, it's real. It matters. And I want to be part of something that matters. You already are." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that watching Mason play. Other families moved around them, parents pushing strollers, kids chasing each other, the ordinary chaos of a Saturday afternoon. They fit into that picture now, just another group of people existing together in the world. "I love you," Adriana said quietly. "I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. And that's terrifying." Liam's breath caught. "I love you too. Even though I'm a mess, you're not a mess. You're just human. And yeah, even though you're human and complicated and sometimes difficult, I love you anyway." Mason came running over, demanding that they push him on the swings. They spent the rest of the afternoon doing exactly that, taking turns pushing while Mason shrieked with joy. When the sun started to set and the park began to empty, they walked back to Liam's building together. "Do you want to come up?" Liam asked. "We're just going to order pizza and watch a movie, but you're welcome to stay." Adriana looked at Mason, then at Liam. "I'd like that." They ordered pizza and argued good-naturedly about toppings. They watched an animated movie that Mason had seen 100 times but still found hilarious. They sat squished together on the couch, Mason between them, and it felt right in a way that made Liam's chest ache. When the movie ended, Mason was asleep against Adriana's shoulder. She looked down at him with such tenderness that Liam had to look away before he said something that would make this moment too heavy. "I should go," Adriana whispered. "Let you get him to bed." "Okay." Liam carefully extracted Mason and carried him to his room. When he came back, Adriana was at the door, coat on, ready to leave. "Today was perfect," she said. "It was pretty good. Better than good. It was everything I didn't know I wanted." She kissed him softly. "I'll see you Thursday?" "Actually, I was thinking, maybe we don't need to stick to Thursdays anymore. Maybe we just see each other when we want to see each other." "Yeah?" "Yeah. I'm tired of compartmentalizing you. I want you to be part of my actual life, not just the part I set aside on Thursday mornings." Adriana's smile could have lit up the whole city. "I want that too." "Good. Then I'll call you tomorrow. We'll figure it out as we go." "As we go, I like that." She left, and Liam stood at the window watching until her car disappeared around the corner. Then he went to check on Mason, who was sprawled across his bed still in his clothes. Liam got him changed and tucked in, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I like Adriana," Mason mumbled, half asleep. "Me too, buddy." "Is she going to be around more?" "Would that be okay with you?" "Yeah, she's nice, and she knows about pterodactyls." "She does know about pterodactyls." Mason was already asleep again. Liam turned off the light and went back to the living room. The apartment felt different than it had 6 months ago. Warmer, somehow. Fuller. Like it was expanding to make room for new possibilities. His phone buzzed. "Made it home. Thank you for today. For Mason. For being patient with me while I figure this out. I know I don't say it enough, but you've changed my life. In the best possible way." Liam smiled and typed back. "You've changed mine too. Get some rest. I'll call you tomorrow." "Good night, Liam." "Good night, Adriana." He set the phone down and looked around the apartment. The dishes still needed washing. The toys still needed organizing. The heating unit still rattled. But none of that felt overwhelming anymore. Because somewhere across the city, there was someone who knew him, really knew him, and chose to show up anyway. Someone who was trying, just like he was trying, to build something real out of the mess of their lives. It wasn't perfect. It probably never would be. But it was enough. More than enough. Liam cleaned up the pizza boxes and washed the dishes, humming a song he didn't remember learning. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to the small miracles happening in apartments and offices and parks. People fell in love and fell apart and found each other again. People grieved and healed and learned to carry their losses without being crushed by them. People made choices that changed everything and choices that changed nothing and somehow kept moving forward anyway. That night, Liam fell asleep thinking about Saturdays at the museum and Thursdays at Joe's and all the ordinary moments that had somehow become extraordinary. He thought about a woman in a navy dress who'd knocked on his door on Christmas Eve and reminded him that life could still surprise him. That connection was possible even when it seemed impossible. That love, real love, was always worth the risk. And somewhere across the city, in an apartment that was slowly becoming less sterile and more lived in, Adriana fell asleep thinking about the same things. About a man who'd let her in when she had nowhere else to go, who'd seen her at her worst and her most vulnerable and hadn't run away, who'd shown her that being human wasn't a weakness but a strength, that asking for help wasn't failure but courage. They both had a long way to go. Adriana still worked too much, still struggled with boundaries, still sometimes forgot that productivity wasn't the same as living. Liam still got stuck in his head, still second-guessed himself, still wondered if he was enough for everyone who needed him. But they were learning. Together, they were learning that perfection was a myth, that vulnerability was a gift, that the messiness of real connection was infinitely more valuable than the pristine isolation of self-protection. They were learning that love didn't fix everything, but it made the hard things bearable. That showing up, even when it scared you, was the bravest thing you could do. And maybe that was enough. Maybe showing up, being honest, trying again even when you failed, maybe that was all anyone could really do. Maybe that was what it meant to be human, to stumble through life making mistakes and hurting people and being hurt, but to keep trying anyway. To keep reaching out, keep connecting, keep believing that tomorrow might be different than today. The snow had stopped falling weeks ago, but spring was still a long way off. The city would endure more cold, more gray days, more storms before the thaw came. But it would come eventually. It always did. And when it did, Liam and Adriana would still be here, still figuring it out, still choosing each other one day at a time. That was all anyone could promise. Not forever, not certainty, not the guarantee that everything would work out perfectly. Just the choice to keep showing up. to keep trying, to keep believing that connection was worth the risk, that love was worth the vulnerability, that being seen and known and accepted, flaws and all, was the whole point of being alive. And in a small apartment that smelled like pizza and dinosaur facts, with a 5-year-old sleeping peacefully in the next room and a billionaire CEO's text message glowing on his phone, Liam Carter finally understood what Sarah had been trying to tell him all along. Life was meant to be lived, not just survived. And it was never too late to start.